Okay, so this is an introduction to your textbook Understanding Rhetoric, and specifically the first part of Chapter 1, titled Spaces for Writing. As some of you have guessed, or seen, I should say, your textbook that talks about writing is actually in the format of a graphic novel, which is a format that I'm awfully fond of, obviously. So, space and rhetorical possibility. In writing, there are various rhetorical devices: definition, description, illustration, argument. These are probably terms that your previous English teachers may have discussed. They're simply methods of communicating ideas. Um, we'll learn more about that later. For now, rhetorical means communication, both written and spoken. This splash page, splash meaning a page that shows the dominant visual metaphor, represents the author's idea of writing. Outer space visually represents the possibilities in writing. The notion of outer space is reinforced by the use of the universe image, as well as the words discovering, going boldly, and exploring. Reminds me of a Star Trek kind of theme. Essentially, the authors want you to associate writing with possibility and travel, which they are hoping motivates you to think of writing as something exciting. I realize that that may or may not be the case depending on who you are, and that's okay. So really, this concept has many sides to it, in that there is a cognitive space occupied by our thoughts, the space on the page, and the physical space in which we write. Looking at these images, you may identify with one or the other, but even as an English teacher, I can definitely say that I I feel like I'm both and in between. Sometimes even in school, I'd get handed a writing assignment and I wouldn't know what to say, and then other times somebody would hand me an assignment that I loved and I would have too much to say. But the gutter meaning the space in between these panels, represents what's not shown here, and probably for most of you, you occupy the space in between. Not one of these polarities, I should say. Regardless of how we feel, we need to think about how all these spaces work together and against each other, especially since a lot of times the success of our writing, or lack thereof, has to do with a disconnect amongst these things. And you and me, can't have that if we are hoping to communicate effectively. In the past, there were public forms for writing, such as newspapers, journals, books, but today we have even more possibilities through media. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Um, I'm too old to know what's really popular right now, so whatever that is, put it in this space. I don't even know. I feel like my little sister tried to tell me something the other day about some new thing, and she's 14, and I was like, I don't know. So I give up. But regardless of what that is, this is still writing. Perhaps not as laborious as writing a research paper or blog for a class, but still every bit as important in terms of communication and self-expression. So let's go back to that previous image. The words, the graffiti, the name Lawrence Turode, which turns out is actually the original name of Mr. T. I hope some of you know who Mr. T is, with the A-Team. Can't believe I did not know that. But this image contains layers of written communication. It's not just what the teacher is saying. It's the sign, the I hate school in the background, the man who is writing graffiti on the side of the wall. He's probably responsible for all the graffiti, but even the signs posted right? All of these are written communication. And these ideas make me think about the three words that stood out to me when I was looking at this panel in particular, which is ownership, authorship, and customary behavior. Particularly customary behavior, because I think a lot of times we don't think about the rules that go with the particular form of writing that we're doing. And I don't even know if we should always think of those rules, but perhaps every once in a while we should, or depending on the situation, we should. These concepts are constantly in flux depending on the situation. Here, a person illegally scrawls on the wall. Interesting image given our viewing of the film Children Full of Life. I feel like this person clearly did not have Mr. Kanamori, because then he wouldn't have hated school, obviously. So what does the X represent to you? You can't answer that. I guess you'll have to answer that to yourself. Sorry. Again, authorship, ownership, customary behavior. You know, looking at this image, here the burning of the flag and statement, justice for all, work against the cookie cutter ideas of writing, but it's still writing. And even if you look at this image, right, and on this page, page 7, there were a couple images, and before this panel, there was an image that was dealing more with public writing, and it had like social networking sites and whatnot, and online postings. And then here, what's being emphasized is more private forms of writing, such as diaries and love letters. Well, I guess people write love letters. Maybe, I don't know. Whether it's a formal class assignment or an everyday communication, the audience's expectation is key, and each writing situation has its own demands. And we have to pay attention to the notion of the self that is being presented, both the public self and or the private self, depending on what we're writing. So really, there's three fundamental questions being asked, at least in this initial part of the book, right? What writing means, what it does, and how it moves from one context to another. And the authors of this book feel that the best way to do this is through images and text rather than just the traditional text. And for this reason, throughout the book, they will refer to a variety of ways in which writing appears. And I think that's important to be considered, because to be a successful writer, even at the college level, it's not just about writing a research paper. It's about effectively communicating.